Excellent. So thank you all for joining us for the Great Data State, South Carolina. We are so excited that we all get to go on this virtual trip to the Palmetto State today. We're excited to have you here with us. If you just joined, please introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us your name, your organization, and where you're calling from today. We always love to get to know who is joining us. Also of note is that we have a live transcript enabled for this call. If you would like the transcript, you can enable it by clicking the button in your screen. So please go ahead and do so if you need, and we will get started. I am Jonathan Barry Wolf. I'm part of the marketing and communications team at Project Unicorn, and I'm so excited to be your virtual tour guide, let's say, to South Carolina today. We have such a stacked group of webinar participants here. We have obviously Project Unicorns here. CETA, who's been a part of the Great Data State series since its beginning, is also represented. We have representatives from Edfi Alliance, IMS Global Learning Consortium, and NCES. And we are all here to talk with Dan from South Carolina's Department of Education about the implementation of multiple data standards in the state. I'm just going to start things off with this welcome and introduction, and then we will move things over to framing the webinar and our work with Susan Bearden. Then Dan will talk about the South Carolina story, followed by some facilitated Q&A, and then an opportunity for you all to ask questions of Dan and the entire crew here represented today. So as we are going along, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. Our speakers will be looking at the chat as they're speaking and may be able to address them in real time, but we will have this excellent moment at the end of the webinar specifically so that you can ask and we can talk about your questions. And then we'll follow things up with a thank you and some next steps, some future webinars with Project Unicorn and our partners. Just to throw some things your way before we get started, if you're a state leader joining us today, check out the Project Unicorn State Commitment to Principles. This was a document developed with Project Unicorn, CCSSO, and CETA. It includes a commitment that you can make to some best practices for advocating for data interoperability and working with school districts and other stakeholders on their data journeys in your state. Really helpful resource. These links are going to be popped in the chat for you, so be sure to click on those. And also following the call, we'll be sending these links out as well. Additionally, encourage districts and ESAs to sign the Project Unicorn School Network Pledge. School districts that sign the pledge get technical assistance, specialized resources, access to these kinds of webinars, and all so that we can come alongside those school districts and help advance data interoperability. So it's free and a really excellent resource when going on a data journey. So be sure to encourage them to do that. Also, encourage districts and ESAs to take the Project Unicorn School District School System Data Survey. This is the second annual year we're conducting the survey. Last year, we anonymized all the survey results and produced a state of the sector report that talked about the state of data interoperability in K-12 data systems across the nation. From that report, we were able to identify areas that schools are doing quite well in, as well as areas in need of growth and improvement. And those areas have directly resulted in the kinds of programming that you are seeing today. So excellent resource for folks to complete. Additionally, every person who completes the survey gets a $25 Amazon gift card. So there's really no downside at all. Check out the survey, encourage folks to sign it. Look at our speakers today. We have so many incredible people. We have Dan Rollier from South Carolina Department of Education as the Director of the Office of Research and Data Analysis, who is going to be speaking with us about South Carolina's data journey. We have Bruce Umstead, the Director of Statewide and Regional Programs at IMS Global Learning Consortium, Maureen Wentworth, the Manager of Strategic Partnerships at Edfi Alliance, and Ross Santee, the Associate Commissioner of the Administrative Data Division of National Center for Education Statistics. And now that I've introduced everyone, I'm going to pass things over to Susan Bearden, the Director of Digital Programs at Project Unicorn to continue us on this journey. So Susan. And let me unmute you, Susan, and then we'll be good to go. There you go.
Hooray, thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it. Thanks for unmuting me, and welcome to everyone who's here today. We are thrilled to be hosting today's webinar, which is going to share how South Carolina has used multiple data standards in their ecosystem. We are huge fans. We have an informal saying, there is no one data standard to rule them all. And South Carolina is doing a great job of explaining how that can work, how the different standards can work together. So just quickly before we get started, just wanted to share some quick community agreements with the group. I want to encourage everybody to stay engaged in today's webinar, and be sure to speak your truth. If you have questions, please, we encourage questions, again, as Jonathan mentioned, during the webinar. Feel free to enter them in the chat. We will also have time for you to answer your questions at the end of the session, but please do enter those questions in the chat. We want you to feel comfortable with experiencing discomfort. Interoperability may be a new topic for some of the folks here today, or it may be something that you're very experienced with. But in any case, we're here to support you on your interoperability journey, no matter where you are. So whether you're just starting out or whether you've been implementing data standards for a long time, we are looking to help you move forward. So thank you for being here today. Just one more thing regarding equity of voice. We want to make sure that everybody has a chance to ask their questions. So again, encourage you to just add those questions in the chat. And then just also want to say to be willing to expect and accept a lack of closure. We only have an hour today to share. And but please know that you can always reach out to our speakers or to the Project Unicorn team for support. We are here for you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and he is going to share the state of South Carolina's data interoperability story. Dan, take it away.
Thank you. I'm Dan Rollier, obviously. So South Carolina is interesting. We're 79 districts at this moment. We're consolidating districts as they in order to build up the technical capacity and have consistent leadership. So our number of districts is shrinking while our number of students is increasing. We're at about, actually when I did this slide, about 754, we're up about 760 now. And about 52,000 teachers. So we're a reasonable sized state. When I was first invited to CCSSO, I got my first introduction to the idea of using interoperability standards. And the gentleman standing up in the front of the room was holding a piece of paper, and it says, well, if you want to roster a student, we have these 3 standards. And I remember thinking to myself, how can there be 3, right? Why are there why would I have more than one way and still call it a standard? And what I've come to learn is that it really is choosing the right size tool for the job, right? So at some levels, we have very, very granular data that's transactional in nature, and it really is meant to go from one computer to another and be consumed and be done, right? Machine level communication that still has to be organized and share the data across the 2 things, but it's transactional. It doesn't need to exist long term. Then I have a different level, and that's the idea that I can bring data together in a single source of truth, right? Where you've got component systems that are all contributing to a data system, and we're still at a very granular level, right? So you're not losing tremendous amounts of information, but there's some loss of the grain size, and I'm using that for short to medium term data storage for operational decisions on my day-to-day basis, especially at the district level, right? So you're running a balance there between reporting capabilities and storage context and the net transactional data. So and there you need a really well-defined delivery technology, the ability to exchange data between disparate systems, multiple disparate systems. So it's not just a point-to-point communication, it's a one-to-many, or can be a one-to-many. And then we actually see yet a larger lens as we start looking up at the policy level. And that's where you start seeing our interactions with the federal government or state reporting through the legislature. You know, the state reporting through the legislature doesn't require a real fine grain size. And this is for medium to long-term storage. So this is something where you might span 20 years if you have an extensive data collection, right? That you wouldn't necessarily want to store transactional data for 20 years. And even operational data starts to lose context because the operation that was existing 20 years ago is not the same operation, same leadership, same questions that are being asked now, or at least not likely to be. Another nice feature is a well-defined extensive data dictionary. So as I look at that large grain size, I still have an organization system that allows me to track what data are being stored and retained for those great periods, longer periods of time. So primary purpose for that large grain site is sharing data across agencies or longitudinal data storage. So understanding the role that each of these different standards offer, and why we actually need all three to answer different types of questions and service different needs. Is key to understanding the role of adopting standards for your state or your district, right? So as a real quick use case, right? I'm using IMS Global to store machine readable standards. We're working on building out a course coding dictionary. We're working on real-time rostering using the one roster standard, and building our set of digital resources, our connections to content. So being able to tag a lesson or a video with a particular state standard in order for people to be able to retrieve it and use it in their lessons. I don't expect that the same video or the same lessons is going to be meaningful or as meaningful 20 years from now. So that this that transactional level is very well represented for that use case. At the other end, well, it's not the other end, it's actually the mid-tier, right? We have our ODSs where we're bringing data together from different sources in order to make informed decisions and run analytics. And I can actually use that as a primary data source. So as I consider different applications that need to be populated, I can retrieve a history, at least within the operational framework, and reconstitute it for a particular application that I couldn't do using just transactional data. And then you have the long term, the bigger picture, the idea of longitudinal data that can span and retain its meaning over 20 years, right? This idea that we can describe performance trends and capture longitudinal data. And maintain the relationships across different agencies as the grain size gets larger. Our ability to share it and have it have some semblance of meaning in different agencies is better defined. So it's really a matter of choosing the right tool for the job. So one of the use cases that we're focused on right now is the adoption of the South Carolina Instructional Hub, right? And we've got vendor partners that are going through and putting out content that have been aligned to state standards and associated, and we're working on associating with our different courses so that every user of the system can retrieve meaningful content and be able to quickly customize lessons. So it represents a large cross-agency effort in order to do this initial load of the tremendous resources that are out there. But the effort that we're putting forth one time, it couldn't be replacing the effort that a teacher is putting forth or 5,000 teachers are putting forth individually. So the scale of work and the impact of what you're doing quickly is reflected across your state, because if a teacher has to go out and search and make a decision on whether or not a lesson meets a particular standard individually, that's being repeated with every teacher that touches that lesson. Whereas if we can curate some of that, you know, and it's not for the purpose of restricting access, it's for the purpose of facilitating personalization and providing depth of resources that have been tagged. So we work across our career and technical education, our early learning and literacy offices, our personalized learning office. Standards and learning obviously plays a major role, virtual education, and actually we've got our teacher professional development offices engaged in how do we teach teachers how to consume this content and build a wide scale and effective lesson. So it's about building a level of support that enables solid decisions at the classroom level and at the district level as they go through and build a digital curriculum. Because we've opened up a world with so many choices that and not all of them are good ones. So whatever support we can provide enables a better decision at the end. So shifting up a little bit from those individual system, right? We can look at the relationship between the different systems that exist within a school district. And this is the first level of where we're tying in a different standard. So we're enabling our student information system, our assessment vendors, financial records, food service records, behavior management systems, our student unique identifier, all have the potential to be engaged and loaded into a single source of truth that I can drive state reporting, district data reporting out of, stand-up information systems, but it can also be used as a data source for applications. The idea that we can put integrated together data and serve it back at the classroom level or at the district level and help make real-time informed decisions across different populations is an incredibly empowering part of enabling classroom and school and district leadership. We believe very strongly that given the good information, people make good decisions, and that by supporting that at a very core level, right, that we're not making decisions for people, but we're facilitating their ability to make decisions, right? So this is just a level of support that, every district in South Carolina has its own Edfi ODS that allows the integration of those systems. And by doing it wide scale across the state, we can do that level of effort once and have it replicated very easily, well, even very easily. Smarter people than me do it, but replicated across the whole state. So every district, no matter how small, has access to good information about their students and able to make great decisions for their communities. Then as we move up, I took a minute to show how this world gets put together, right? We have the district data sources that are feeding using the Edfi API into a district centralized data source, that Edfi ODS at the district level. And that information is now moves up to the state Edfi ODS. So I choose a subset of the district's operational data and move it up to the state. But I also have the ability to move district down to this, from the state down to the districts, to facilitate student record transfers, to deliver accountability data back to the state. So it can be included in, and drive the accountability data back down to the district, so it can be included in district level reporting. And then we have the long term, right? As we move up to a SEDS operational data store, which contains our 1 year's data in the SEDS format. And then we use that to populate longitudinal data store. And that facilitates applications that are being developed across the SEDS community using the Generate tool, which we can use that tool to pre-populate the EdFacts reports, and we'd take a look at what we'd be submitting to the federal government, do some QA on it, and then greatly reduce the burden of doing our federal reporting. Off to the side there, you'll see a series of output data marts. Those represent the different data marts that we stand up for different agency offices that consume different portions of that, so that the migrant office or the homeless office have a specialized data set that's stored in a central repository, but still is able to inform their decisions. So that this model actually extends across agencies as we look at our ability to consume workforce and post-secondary data, all within a single data dictionary and a defined set of operations. So using the full spectrum of data standards, well, full spectrum, part of the spectrum of data standards that are available, we are able to feed or satisfy the needs at the machine level and tagging to deliver at the classroom, at the district level, and looking at also our state needs, and do so in a very efficient manner compared to flat file exchange that tend to be very, very labor intensive, both at the district and at the state level. So this has been a wonderful opportunity to kind of share where we are as a state, but I'd like to allow Bruce, Maureen, and Ross to kind of weigh in on their view of how the different standards and standards organizations start to impact different segments of the education spectrum.
Okay, great. Well, why don't we kick up? Why don't we start with you, Bruce, because you're closest to the left on my screen. Can you hear a little bit?
Yeah, I'm good to go. I'm in Grand Rapids today at our ISTE affiliate conference, so happy to be joining the call. You went on mute though, Susan, so I can't hear you.
So Bruce, we're engaged in a couple of different standards with you. We're looking at one roster, and we're looking at case and digital credentials. So I get a little bit lost as I try and explain to people how they get engaged in enacting those standards and where their point of entry could be, depending on their use case.
Well, yeah, just to get started, IMS Global Learning Consortium has been around for over 20 years. We were organized out of EDUCAUSE to be a standards organization, so education data standards. And we've been, pushing on several key areas of interoperability. Our primary and basic standard is LTI, and you're using that in your instructional hub to get the resources to the students and the teachers that need them with relevancy. But I think where you've really pioneered for us is that you're working on publishing your education academic standards in a digital format. So the machines that are in your digital learning ecosystem can all read off the same page, right? So PDFs, we love them. They're safe, secure, they're WYSIWYG, but they are not interoperable. And so by you taking the step of publishing your standards in a digital format known as CASE, Competency and Academic Standards Exchange, it makes it much, much easier to do that alignment using LTI, but then also being able to specifically, pick the right standard for South Carolina, and South Carolina standards then follow that standard follows the student and learning all the way through the cycle, through assessment back to the grade book. And you have really provided us with a great deal of leadership, especially in the area of course codes, because those have not been interoperable. Those have been keyed in either from spreadsheets or PDFs again. And your leadership there is really I think going to move the entire market towards getting to a point where our course codes are interoperable, and you can then start tagging a lot more data to those courses. And if you start thinking about how valuable courses are in the education system, we really appreciate that leadership. Ultimately, what you talked about, moving towards digital credentials, we are maintaining and extending the open badges standard, which came over from the Mozilla Foundation. We have a very extensive ecosystem that can exchange those digital credentials, which is kind of the next generation way of documenting licensure, certification, and ultimately competency and mastery-based education in K-12. And we have three leading standards there. It's CASE, how you publish the learning targets, right? The competencies. Moving to open badges, how do you recognize achievement, learning? And then comprehensive learner record, which is a newer specification. How do you transcript or create digital wallets for storing all those credentials from the various sources, as we've seen kind of society and our education system kind of move to that modular approach. So we really appreciate it when states like South Carolina lean in on our standards, not just to use them, but in your case, Dan, actually help lead our industry forward in making these things interoperable. And we couldn't do it without that customer voice and leadership. So we thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. I'm actually using the course coding as a bridge now to the SCED platform, which is the national standards for course codes that I think falls under somebody up at the Fed's office, right? Where we're tying our activity codes using the machine readable, an adaptation or extension of the case standard in order to start mapping our codes to the SCED coding, which I'm hoping in the long term will allow interstate communication with meaningful connections between courses. So the cloud, I should mention that all of these things actually are now being hosted up in AWS in the cloud, where we maintain partitioned instance between the district ODSs and the state ODS, and use the Edfi API to communicate between them, but maintain that separate instances and the kind of privacy and security that allows us to maintain a level of confidentiality and local governance. So it's been just the right time to look at building out all of these different connections. So we're engaged with two other communities, right? We're engaged with the CEDS community, and we're beginning our engagement with the SCED community. And Ross, you've been a great proponent of those and supporting us making those connections.
Yeah, and thank you, Dan, for your leadership and taking time today to sort of talk everybody through this and what it's meant for South Carolina. I think, the presentation of your use cases brings forth, something that we've been all trying to keep getting a better handle on for many, many years now. I mean, we started CEDS over 10 years ago, looking at all the different solutions that have been out there and the different models that came from them, and recognizing what's all the information that an education agency, whether state or local or a post-secondary institution, needs to manage. And how do we get a consistent language and a consistent framework for that data discussion. So the standards really started trying to provide that connective tissue between and across what already existed in the field. And you've given a lot of great examples on solving specific use cases and looking at what makes the most sense in terms of granularity, in terms of privacy, in terms of a number of different factors for the specific use you're trying to solve. And CEDS is trying to provide that common way of talking about all those things. And I think we've done a lot over the 10 years to evolve from really starting as a dictionary, a way for people to express their own data needs and their own data models in a consistent fashion, to actually becoming a data model. And you talk about some of the longitudinal aspects and some of the places where, that 1 year capture of data that's used for federal reporting, for example, having that consistency to let states map their individualized data structures and what they're getting from their districts, whether they're using something like Edfi for pieces of it, IMS for other pieces, or if they're using something totally different, bring that into something consistent. Use a tool like the Generate tools to create some consistent reporting structures that come up to the federal government. It's not dissimilar from, you mentioned SCED codes, which came out of the National Forum for Education Statistics, which is coordinated through our office. And those codes were same sort of thing, thinking specifically about high school codes. How do we bring some consistency to a world where we know local control is going to decide that what exactly gets taught in an algebra class might be a little different, but how do we understand some of that and bring some consistency to the information model on top of it? So we've done a lot, and everybody, who's part of this session today, I consider to be a partner in CEDS, and it's been great, and happy to have that conversation, have started and be brought to life by what you've been doing in South Carolina and in a number of other states, and happy to keep, pushing this conversation forward. So thank you.
No, thank you guys for providing the resources. I've saved Maureen for last because she's actually the one that started me on this journey. It was in her meeting where I was first exposed to the idea of the three distinct standards at a CCSSO meeting, and Maureen walked me through as a novice, understanding how to utilize them, and has been a tremendous partner in helping market and develop our district's understanding of the Edfi Alliance, and have gotten a wonderful amount of support both in the technology area and in the governance area. So I've leaned very heavily on her as the glue in the center that drives us forward. So Maureen, if you'd share just a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks, Dan. And I think, I think we'll all, sing your praises about how you've thought particularly about the governance of this work. And thinking about both your own state needs and what the state needs to own or needs to have and collect and be able to share both for state reporting, reporting to your legislature, reporting to the federal government, but more importantly, how you're enabling your districts to really utilize data to support student learning. And that's, coming in the form of of both analytics and what kind of data they want to pull out of their individual systems to create that full picture of student learning, as well as how you're connecting that to learning objects and other pieces. So I just, the ability to think uniquely about each of the use cases and which data standards serves those needs is really fantastic. And it's a really great example of strong state leadership. We're excited to be part of this conversation in South Carolina and other states to really think about how do we modernize our education systems by utilizing our data standards and getting that data to move in real time. And it's not easy work. It's not quick work always, but it's important work as we think about how our students and how our teachers, how our parents interact with technology these days. You would never allow your bank to say, well, we can't give you your current balance today because we haven't been able to upload from 8 different systems. We use data in our lives in ways that empower what we do, and we want to be able to use data in student lives that empower students and teachers to do great things. And so this is the work your state is taking on in South Carolina, the work many states are taking on is so important to really be able to unlock the power of that data in education and be able to improve our outcomes because of it. We've seen, over the course of the last 2 years, so much more reliance on technology in education. And so being able to bring those systems together, connect those systems with real-time data only becomes more and more important.
And I'd like to say that Dan's actually understands as he's opening up his data system, he's also securing it. Dan was the first state to go statewide with our Trusted Apps program, where we vet over 7,000 apps for their student data privacy policies, cybersecurity policies, and then can present to his districts which apps are approved, which ones are under review, which ones may need to be denied, and leave it up to the local districts to decide which apps they present to their teachers for usage. But Dan's vision there is really kind of created a dashboard to make it really easy for surfacing those decisions and presenting it to teachers. So while he's opening up his systems, he's actually leading on securing that data and identifying sore spots when it comes to providing student data privacy and cybersecurity protections.
Thanks, Bruce. It's been great to be able to utilize all the systems that everybody's brought. I think we should open up the floor to see if anybody has any questions. I tend to talk a little fast. I hope I wasn't too quick of a data dump.
And this has been great. And while we're encouraging folks to add stuff into the chat, I have a question I'd like to ask. You have described today a tremendously complex and comprehensive data system. And I'm imagining that didn't happen overnight. How long did it take you to build this system? And what were kind of some of the steps you took along the way?
Well, so I don't think the system is ever done. To be honest with you, I think that there's as data needs change, then the standards and the data systems have to evolve with them. We actually started in 2015, early 2016. Where our state used to just bring up copies of the local district databases or segments of those databases and then create a data repository. And at first I would get very frustrated when the vendor changed their data system. And then I realized that I was wrong. I was very wrong in the expectation that a vendor would have to maintain status quo on their internal product and not do what's best for them in terms of data storage and performance in the application, right? That the actual flaw was that I wasn't putting forth the right effort to standardize the data. So and that's when we started on the SEDS journey. I think we were back at version 5 or 6, Ross, maybe 6, right? And we started doing the mapping from our SIS vendors' proprietary files over to CDS using tools that the CDS platform offered for mapping. And then as we built that out, I learned about sets of tools that were enabling those connections, and the idea that I could move from a OBDC connection or a flat file exchange to a more real-time transaction using an API was very, very attractive. And the idea that somebody had already done the work in building that API made it that much better, so that I was able to leverage a technology stack that one, reduced my cost because I don't have to maintain the OBDC queries with the VPN tunnels, that I can use a secure data exchange system, and somebody's done the legwork for me. That was a big win. And then the other part of it was my boss, right? she, you know, the state superintendent. At one point, I was responsible for a series of goals when I got hired, right? And I was in the Office of Research and Data Analysis, and my goal was improving test scores. And I said, well, I collect them, right? But how am I supposed to improve test scores? And the answer for me was by providing better support for the districts, so that they're spending time doing the right things in the classroom. Not that I know what the right thing is, right? But anything that I can do that reduces the amount of time and effort that somebody is doing to move data from place to place and make decisions about what's the best thing to put in front of my students, then that shift in mindset to what can I do to support, what can I do to build infrastructure, or the roads or pathways that allow the right decisions to be made in classrooms. And it came down to looking at the transactional data that IMS does a good job of helping and facilitating those communications. So that last step along the way was a boot in the butt by my superintendent that says, look, we have a responsibility. We're not just here to fuss at districts about what they're not doing right, that we have a responsibility to lead and support them to get them where they need to be. And the fact that I was able to leverage technology to save money while doing it was a bonus. So, it became a matter of how can we help validate district data at the point of entry and provide support as people are typing the data in. How can I improve the quality of reporting that's happening at that SIS level by engaging with other partners that are able to support that. So it really just was a matter of switching mindset, of deciding that the role of the state is not just to monitor, but it is to support and improve and lead. So that's where we that's how we made that transition. It's a conscious decision.
Dan, I think you're That's such a great point. And we've talked for over a decade now at state education agencies about becoming service providers to their districts. And that was often the conversation that we had at chiefs meetings and while I was at CCSSO. And in my humble opinion, technology and data is the best entry point to being a service provider, especially in a state that has strong local control. The best opportunity to help provide service is to equalize the playing field when it comes to access to data and use of data, and supports around technology services. And so I love that is happening in South Carolina and in other states, and it's a great trend, I think, to how we as state agencies think about serving our districts.
Absolutely. Dan, I love that support mindset, and tagging onto that idea and that mindset that you have. How did the state of South Carolina work with your LEAs to implement and provide technical assistance and training? I think you alluded to some of that earlier in the presentation. I would love to learn more about your approach.
Well, South Carolina had a series of consortiums, but there was very limited technical support available through them. And because we were using direct OBDC connections to the districts, there wasn't a whole lot of data governance that was governing the relationship between what I was collecting and what the district was providing. So went to the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, and we got support for something called the District Data Governance Group. So we created literally a partnership organization across, I think there's 45 or 50 of the districts are now members that form a data control board, and they've hired an executive director that gets to argue with me and be that representative and that counterpoint and provide data governance support. So we've created through the notion of shared governance of allowing decisions, facilitating decisions at the level where it's appropriate. If I make a bad decision at the state level, somebody's got to call me on it, right? And that's the function of this district data governance group, right? To provide that collective voice and a place to help build their peers' capacity around data governance and security and privacy and access to data, and act as a partner with the state in building this infrastructure.
And that makes me so happy to hear this, because when we did our school system data survey last year and we published our state of the sector report, one of our top findings was that data governance was the biggest challenge in districts across the country. Districts, it didn't matter, districts of all sizes, all locales, didn't matter, large, small, urban, suburban, rural, data governance was something that districts across the board were struggling with. So I'm so happy to hear that you are building these structures in South Carolina to help build district capacity, to make, to help move their work forward.
It's been a great adventure.
I love that. And speaking that it's been a great adventure, I'm wondering, what recommendations would you have for other states who are interested in following your lead?
Well, one of my largest frustrations and the biggest time sucks, for lack of a better word, was poor quality data, right? And there's, and Ross would fuss at me if I sent poor quality data, and they'd have their business rules and it's go clean it up, go clean it up. And I was saying the same things to my district. And then I realized that they were sending the best that they had, right? They weren't keeping the good stuff, the good quality data wasn't being kept in a closet someplace. So in other words, they collectively didn't have good access to good quality data, right? So if by changing that mindset, by making data consumable, usable, real to the people who are making the real decisions, right? Not because I need to make me happy, or not because I need to make Ross happy. Though I want you to be happy, Ross, don't get me wrong. But the real danger here is that the people who use and need this data don't have good data. And that's something that really hits you upside the head, that if we don't improve the quality of the data at the local level and their access to high quality data by making it usable, by making it consumable, but then misinformation is guiding our children and decisions about our children. It's just, it's not a hard jump. You just have to really think it through.
Absolutely. But would you say that, and what else would you recommend for states? So obviously, helping districts improve their data quality is an important first step. Are there any other important first steps that you would recommend states take?
Well, one of the things that we've done is provide hosting environments for all the CISs in order to, there's a cost, right? But the cost isn't as much as a security breach would cost in terms of our population. So helping districts provide safe, secure environments is something that you are doing for every stakeholder in your state. And we can do it at a scale and with a sense of bargaining power that can't be matched at the local level, unless, I shouldn't say it like that. There's some districts that are larger than my state, but by and large, the states have a relatively few large districts, and then you have this long tail of small and medium-sized districts where basic things like cybersecurity, protected data, protecting your students is a major struggle, and it just shouldn't be, right? Your students' data shouldn't be at risk because people didn't take ownership where they could.
Absolutely. Well, before we are getting towards the end, so just wanted to encourage folks, if you have questions, please feel free to add them in the chat. I did want to ask our representatives from the standards bodies if you might be willing to share what resources you have available to support state leaders. And I'm just going to start with Maureen because you're the furthest to the left on my screen, Maureen. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and thanks for the question. I think, one of the things as we talk generally, about all of these efforts to modernize our systems, whether it be in an Edfi context or not, it's hard. It's hard work. It's hard work to lift and shift a system, to think about new processes. And we haven't solved all of that yet. I apologize for everyone on the phone. I don't think any one of us has a silver bullet to say, if you just hit this easy button, your data will all of a sudden be of high quality and in real time and meet all the needs for all the stakeholders all the time. So that said, we are, I think, as an education community, as an education data community, really striving for better tools to support the work that's going on at the state level and at the district level. And in the Edfi community, we're really striving to create opportunities for more learning around interoperability, both generally and within an Edfi context. And so from that, we've created a couple things over the last couple of years to help states and districts out. We hope, and we'll always take your feedback on these things, but we've created a series of what we call starter kits to support use cases at the district and the state level to help jumpstart that implementation process. And so at the state level, there is a modernizing IT infrastructure starter kit, and I'll drop these while I'm talking, hopefully. Drop some links in the chat or maybe right after. But it's an opportunity to kind of start playing around with the technology and start organizing yourself for implementation. Again, not an exact easy button, but an opportunity to get your systems and your heads wrapped around how to work towards an implementation. The other thing that we launched recently is called the Edfi Academy. And so I am going to drop these links in the chat. The Edfi Academy is really, it's an online learning platform to help work through some of the both leadership level and technical level aspects of implementation. And so there's so far a 100 level course offering that helps kind of get agency staff, the district or the state agency, and your vendor communities kind of understanding the work that it takes to implement a data standard and implement an API for for real-time data sharing and collection. So those are kind of two of the things that we've been working on lately. Love to have people's feedback on that. We like to say around our office, if it were easy, it would be done by now. And so we've got, I think, still a lot of journey to go. And as Dan mentioned, is the work ever really done? But trying to create some tooling and some supportive wraparound services to help either jumpstart or handhold along the way.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maureen.
You're welcome.
Moving on to Ross with CEDS. What resources do you have for state leaders?
The best resources, there's a lot of things we've worked up over the years to meet specific needs and also provide just general information. But the best resource really is the open source community. That's where we are driving the standard. We're looking for and processing the input on what's not covered by the standard or those open questions about how does the standard help us with this. If you're out there and you're thinking about an integration project or you're not quite sure how some of your pieces would fit together, chances are there's somebody not too far from the open source community, hopefully already in it, who's wrestling with, if not the exact same, very similar issues. So I'll pop the URL for that in the chat, but knowing that we're short on time, I'll just leave it at the open source community is the best place for that.
Great, thank you. And Bruce, can you share what resources IMS Global has for state leaders?
Sometimes joining IMS feels like you're running to catch up and jump on the bus. What we really offer our members is engagement. When you want to move the market like Dan does, because of our supplier base, him jumping in, learning what we're working on, bringing his challenges to our innovation leadership networks, which I run like 5 or 6 a month on different topics from digital credentials to data and assessment. That is really what we offer. So we help people catch up to speed and better understand the underlying data standards, but really we've kind of taken up our conversation, our engagement conversation up a notch so that we can talk about where do you want to go? Where do you need the market to shift so you can achieve your vision? I think you're seeing that Dan is able to do that. And he's doing it by being a leader at the national level. And we really appreciate that. We've got about 30 organizations that are helping us provide that customer voice, customer vision, customer leadership. And that's really what we offer, is the ability to engage and move the market towards accessibility and equity.
Terrific. Thank you, Bruce. And before we end, we have one question that just got popped into the chat from Justin. You talked extensively about interoperability to get data to flow to the district and then to the state. Could you speak briefly about how you get that data back into the hands of teachers to help them make timely data-driven instructional decisions?
Well, it's ironic, but that is something that we're actually actively working on right now. One by, I guess it's still a pretty high level, but a facilitated record exchange, because all of our data are stored in a single standard. I can move records between schools and districts without having to do re-entry. So what used to take 10 days to get a student record allows us to write it right back to the receiving school as soon as it's confirmed. So that's kind of a different window into it. But the other place we're doing it is in building out applications with our partners. So we provide test data back to the teacher level. We've built an application that integrates interim assessment and summative assessment in order to feed students' trajectories back to teachers, and made that available at the class level. So a teacher can log in, see the child's historical scores, see what their growth projection is for the next year, and identify areas of need to the level of granularity that the summative assessment allows, and incorporating those in a way that ties their information about their demographics with the assessment data, with the IEP data, allows a teacher to go to one place to retrieve the spectrum of data around a student.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dan. And thank you to all of our panelists. I'm going to turn things over to Jonathan to wrap things up.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and facilitators. And thank you for joining us for this incredible event. It was really, really fascinating. And I just loved hearing from everyone today. So thanks so much. If you enjoyed this trip to South Carolina, check out our previous Great Data State series trips to Wisconsin and Nebraska. Those links will also be in the chat, and we'll follow up with those afterward, in addition to the recording of this event, so you can watch it again. We got a couple of webinars in the pipeline. On March 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we have Is Data Neutral? Critical questions about bias and equity. The planning conversations have been outstanding for this webinar. I feel like I've learned so much in just prepping. So be sure to attend this event. It's going to be a great one. And we'll be taking our next stop in the Great Data State series to North Dakota. This one's going to be on April 6th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. All these links will be sent to you afterwards so you can register and join us in the future. Thank you so much for coming with us to South Carolina today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thanks so much. Have a great day.